An obvious lesson. From the beginning of organized warfare, frontal attacks against prepared defenses have usually failed, a fact written large in military history for all generals to see. Even more pertinent, because it was part of the active service experience or training of the senior generals in Korea, was the trench warfare of World War I, which this phase of the Korean War copied almost exactly. World War I had showed conclusively that frontal attacks could not succeed except at such an enormous human cost that the term victor became derisory, since no one emerged a winner from those rendezvous with death at the disputed barricades of the Western Front. Yet the lesson had not been learned. The men who had seen or studied the trench warfare of World War I ordered it anew in the Korean War, and the results in Korea were identical to what they had been in Europe: enormous human losses and no appreciable tactical or strategic gains. The lesson I learned from Bloody Ridge and Heartbreak Ridge was that great generals do not act as did the generals who ordered the ridgeline battles in Korea. Great generals do not repeat what has failed before. They do not send troops directly into a battle for which the enemy is prepared and waiting. On the contrary, great generals strike where they are least expected, against opposition that is weak and disorganized. The tremendous advances in military technology since the Korean War have not changed this fundamental truth. Technology governs only what methods we use to achieve military decisions. Advances in weaponry actually increase the need for generals to avoid the most heavily defended and dangerous positions, and to seek decisions at points where the enemy does not anticipate strikes. Especially since the Vietnam War, astonishing improvements have occurred in the accuracy and deadliness of rocketry and conventional non-nuclear weapons, by use of satellites to navigate with precision and radar, infrared, laser, and other sounding devices to guide smart bombs and missiles onto targets. These advances have brought forth predictions of future automated battlefields, where weapons will be so effective that human beings will be unable to survive on them, and battles will be fought by robots and all sorts of unmanned aircraft, vehicles, and weapons. But there is a significant counter-trend that portends warfare depending less on overwhelming firepower and more on movements of small bodies of unobtrusive individuals who achieve their goals by surprise, ambushes, and unanticipated movements. The reason war may be moving in this seemingly contradictory direction is that the technology that has produced main battle tanks, assault aircraft, warships, and rockets has also produced weapons that can destroy many of these offensive weapons. Defensive weapons are much cheaper than offensive weapons, and some can be held in the hands of a single defender. One such is the Stinger missile, which Afghan rebels used effectively to knock down helicopters during the Soviet Union's intervention in Afghanistan in the 1980s. The Patriot missile, which destroyed Iraqi Scud missiles in the Persian Gulf War of 1991 and can destroy attacking aircraft, costs only a fraction of a Scud's price and about 1% of a fighter bomber's. If, as a number of technologists believe, the tank is already obsolete, and manned aircraft and large warships too expensive, complicated, and vulnerable to survive for long against defensive missiles, then future wars may be fought less by unmanned weapons and robots on an automated battlefield, and more by small bodies of dispersed, well-trained, and well-armed troops who move deceptively and inconspicuously around obstacles, conducting war more like what we associate today with guerrilla or semi-guerrilla forces. The Soviet Union lost such a war in Afghanistan. It is unlikely that mankind will resort to nuclear war. Any use of a nuclear bomb would bring an instant nuclear reprisal, which could accelerate beyond human capacity to control and result in making most of the earth uninhabitable. No sane ruler wants to sentence his own people to death. Even if a mad dictator secures a nuclear device and uses it, sensible world leaders almost certainly will destroy him and his scientists with a surgical blow, but will not succumb to nuclear holocaust. The future is not ours to see, but it will probably bring to war the same challenges that have burdened generals since the beginning of armed conflict. How to avoid the enemy's main strength, and how to strike a decisive blow against him. War will change, but the principles of war will remain the same. The English strategist Basil H. Littlehart says the goal of the great captain is the same as that of Paris in the Trojan War of Greek legend 3,000 years ago. Paris avoided any obvious target on the foremost Greek champion, Achilles, but instead directed his arrow at Achilles' only vulnerable point, his heel. The outstanding Confederate cavalry raider Nathan Bedford Forrest encapsulated the secret of great generals when he said that the key to victory is to get there first with the most. However, the true test of the great general is broader than this. It is to decide where there is, where the Achilles' heel can be located. For the point where the successful commander concentrates his forces must be a point that is vital, or at least extremely important, to the enemy. To get there first with the most, the military commander must understand and practice the aim of another great Confederate leader, Stonewall Jackson, to mystify, mislead, and surprise the enemy. This is because no intelligent enemy commander will willingly uncover a point or place that is vital or important to him. He will do so only if forced or deceived. To achieve such force or deception, the great captain will nearly always act in one of two manners. He will move so as to make the opposing general think he is aiming at a point different from what he is actually aiming at, or he will operate in such a way that the enemy commander must, in the words of the great Union general in the American Civil War, William Tecumseh Sherman, find himself on the horns of a dilemma, unable to defend two or more points or objectives, and thus forced to cede at least one in order to save another. One of the remarkable facts about great generals throughout history is that, except in cases where they possessed overwhelming power, practically all their successful moves have been made against the enemy's flank or rear, either actual or psychological. Great generals realize that a rear attack distracts, dislocates, and often defeats an enemy physically by cutting him off from his supplies, communications, and reinforcements, and mentally by undermining his confidence and sense of security. Great generals know a direct attack, on the other hand, consolidates an enemy's defenses and, even if he is defeated, merely forces him back on his reserves and his supplies. These concepts have been accepted in principle in many armies for a long time. Against a weak or incompetent enemy, they are easy to apply. In the 1991 Gulf War, for example, U.S. General H. Norman Schwarzkopf applied this classic doctrine to defeat the 500,000-man Iraqi army in 100 hours. While fixing the main Iraqi force in Kuwait in place by threatening an amphibious invasion from the Gulf and by launching 2 U.S. Marine divisions and other forces directly on Kuwait, he sent 2 mobile corps nearly 200 miles westward into the Arabian Desert. These corps then swept around behind the Iraqi army, cutting off its line of supply and retreat to Baghdad, and pressing it into a tight corner between the Euphrates River, the Gulf, and the Marines advancing from the south. Iraqi soldiers surrendered by the thousands, and resistance collapsed. Not all wars are so one-sided as the 1991 Gulf War, and not all opponents so ready to surrender. In war, the one great incalculable is human resistance. Because human response is so unpredictable, commonplace or mediocre generals often do not understand the full significance of flank or rear attacks and, usually because of strong enemy resistance, find themselves drawn or provoked into a direct strategy and frontal attacks, which are rarely decisive. One of the factors that make a general great, and therefore make him rare, is that he can withstand the urge of most men to rush headlong into direct engagements and can see instead how he can go around rather than through his opponent. One reason such generals are few is that the military profession, like society as a whole, applauds direct solutions and is suspicious of personalities given to indirection and unfamiliar methods, labeling them as deceptive, dishonest, or underhanded. A big cause of American hatred of the Japanese in World War II was that they launched a sneak attack against an unexpected point, Pearl Harbor and Hawaii. The military profession and the public have idealized rather than